We're talking about the 3 best weapons in Warzone after the mid-season update, and we're starting with the Bren. That's right, the horrible meta that did take over Caldera. It has been nerfed, but it hasn't been knocked into the dust just yet. The main changes to the weapon were based around this Queen's 705 barrel, which had its damage range drop-off reduced, which is pretty fair since before the nerf, it was basically unlimited. So basically now at those longer distances, those kind of extreme long distances, it's not going to do as much damage. But it's still very effective and pretty much the exact same at those medium to long distances still, just not at those extreme long distances. If you combine this change with the minor recoil increase that it had, the Bren is absolutely still in the mix for the meta following the mid-season update. And that's overall a good thing, I think. It's by no means the only weapon to use now in Warzone. It's one of the meta options, sure, but it's not the only option, and I'm going to share a couple more today. But first, let's get into the best attachments for the Bren, and as you can see, they are kind of largely what you would be using before the mid-season update. So first up, we've got the MX silencer for the muzzle, then we've got the Queen's 705mm for the barrel. Then for optic, I've gone for the SVT40 3 to 6 times magnified scope. But alternatively, you could go for the 2.5 times magnification, which is a little better if you're taking on closer range gunfights, of course. For the stock, we've got the Hawkinson SP2B stock. Yeah, that's kind of standard and offers some nice flinch resistance and accuracy and recoil boost. For the perks, we've got tight grip and fully loaded. As I say, a lot of these attachments are pretty similar to what we had before the mid-season update. So along with that, we've got the polymer grip for that flinch resistance again. Then we've got 40 round mags and lengthened for the magazine and ammo. And then finally for the underbarrel, we've got the M1930 Strife angled. This mix of attachments on the Bren keeps its recoil in check whilst having decent aiming down sight speed, along with keeping the best part of the Bren, and that's those hard hitting shots with high damage. Like I said, it's in the mix for the meta, but it's not the only option, which brings us to the STG, which is my second choice for the meta at the moment. So the STG has actually had a buff with the mid-season update that came around, mostly around its recoil and visual recoil, so that's great for us. So for the attachments, I recommend the MX silencer. Then for the barrel, we've got the VDD760 barrel, which is the barrel that actually got changed with the update, which gives us that little bit of better visual recoil. And as you can see here, we have the reduced scope sway and gun bob, and that plays into that visual recoil. Then on top of this, we've got the extra accuracy and damage range, which makes it without a doubt the best barrel for the STG for that long range meta. Then for the optic, I've gone for a 2.5 times magnification. This was the alternative that I mentioned with the Bren, but with the STG, you're more likely to take on gunfights a little bit closer in. Then for the stock, we've got the VDD 34S weighted, followed by sleight of hand and fully loaded for the perks. We've got polymer grip for the rear grip. Then we're on to magazine and the ammo type. So the magazine on the STG is very much going to be a personal choice. I've gone for 60 round mags. Obviously it's great you get more rounds in your magazine, but most importantly, you don't get that reduced damage, bullet penetration and velocity and range which you do with the 50 round mags. So basically, if you want a longer range build on your STG, I'd recommend going for the 60 round. Then for those close to medium range builds where you want a higher fire rate and aiming down sight speed, go for the 50 round. For ammunition, we've obviously got lengthened, which is kind of the go-to choice for Vanguard weapons because we want that extra bullet velocity. Lastly, for the underbarrel, we've got the M1941 hand stop, and that's basically everything for the STG for a long range build. It's probably still not quite as good as the Bren at those extra long distances, but for everywhere in between, the STG is fantastic. Okay, now lastly, I'm going away from the Vanguard weapons and going back to a Cold War favorite, and that's the XM4. The XM4 is back in Warzone in a big way. It fills that mid-range assault rifle meta basically perfectly and can be matched as a sniper support pretty much seamlessly. It's easy to use and has a high fire rate, so it's really forgiving as well if you do miss a few shots. The only real downside is that it is a little weaker than the last two weapons, so does have a slightly lower time to kill. For these weapons, of course, we only get 5 attachment choices, so I've set up a pretty classic build. I've got the agency suppressor, the 13.5 inch task force barrel, axial arms ×3, magazine just a 45 round standard, followed by the field agent grip for the underbarrel. One of the best things about the XM4 right now, apart from it being able to destroy players, is that it's actually pretty slept on. Not many people are using it at all, so basically when you're on the map and you're at those mid-range distances taking on enemies, you're most likely gonna have the advantage. So they are the top 3 weapons to use in Warzone right now, and yes, they're all assault rifles, or in the Bren's case, an LMG, which is kind of usually the case in Warzone since most gunfights are at range. In terms of which one takes the #1 spot altogether, it actually kind of depends on how you play. The Bren, being an LMG, of course, hits very hard, but is kind of slow in terms of mobility and aiming down sight speed. So say if you want to set up in areas and hold the high ground, sure, go for the Bren, that's absolutely fantastic. Then for those mid to long ranges, we want to look towards the STG, which has slightly better mobility, very good accuracy, and right now, low recoil, so it can absolutely beam people. Then lastly, we've got this XM4, which kind of sits that close to mid-range meta and can just absolutely destroy as your sniper support. I hope this video has helped you out. If it has, give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye for now.